صباح الخير أستاذ.
صباح الخير. Good morning. Just 1 minute. Can you hear me?
سامعينك أستاذ.
كتير حلو. Very good. Just 1 minute to share screen. بس لحظة لأعمل sharing screen. Clear? Okay, good morning everybody.
Good morning, Ustaz.
Good morning. Nice to meet everyone. Today is March 21. I would like to say for everyone, Happy Mother's Day for everyone's mother. Also for every single colleague who is a teacher and a mother, and all for the mothers on this planet.
شكرا أستاذ. شكرا.
Habibati. Okay. So upon your request, I will be repeating the schedule of yesterday. So, do you have any questions before I start? Do you have any questions before I start? No questions? Okay. So concerning our section, diagnostic applications of antibody properties, as we have discussed yesterday, that the basic issue of understanding how antibodies can be used in diagnosis of what do we call biological test, we have to keep in mind the basic structure of the antibody, which is a Y-shaped protein, and that Y-shaped protein is distinguished from the bottom, but what do we call the constant part that can be fixed on our body receptors. Unfortunately, some body types of cells have constant regions that can fix these antibodies, but what is most significant in the upper part is the presence of two binding sites, which is the conjugation of actually the heavy and the light chain. So these two binding sites are very significant because they enable this antibody and a particular antibody to bind to a particular type of epitope. If we proceed to the next slide, we can review quickly what we have mentioned discussing the way antibodies react with our blood cells. So just to review for everyone in this section that these antibodies are very specific, and in this case you have a kind of RBC that could be considered as an antigen, and these are the epitopes, and these exclusive type of antibodies can bind to such epitopes in order to form what we call the cross-bridging reaction. So if we keep in mind this principle that be applicable in the case of blood type A, B, AB, and O, and if we just keep in mind that the antibodies and the epitopes are one-to-one cross-reaction, we can apply right now what we call a test that is mentioned to be a serological test. Yesterday I have mentioned quickly maybe the case of a typhoid fever, أو نسميها حمى التيفوئيد. So when we talk about typhoid fever, we're talking about a particular case when your body is infected, unfortunately, with what do we call a kind of bacterium called salmonella. And this salmonella, usually it comes from sewage water, drainage of sewage water, and such salmonella can dissipate into drinking water, potable water, or maybe to some type of food that we ingest. So معناتها, the major cause of typhoid fever is being infected by a food that we have ingested and is contaminated with what we call salmonella. So how to test for being salmonella positive or salmonella negative in order to confirm whether you have typhoid or you are negative to typhoid, to repeat the procedure, which is in the form of 6 steps, you can see that we have to make sure to collect a sample of blood from that patient who is suspected to be having typhoid. I'm not sure if he has typhoid. I have to centrifuge the plasma, because keeping in mind that if you react to somebody's antigen, what should we have in our body that confirm my infection? Who can tell me the answer? What could be the item that I have to look for to confirm whether I am typhoid positive or COVID-19 positive or maybe HIV positive? Maybe جاوبني. Any answer? Which item we should look for in our body?
Antibodies.
Exactly. مين قال antibodies?
Antibody.
Samar.
Samar? Definitely antibodies. So the presence of antibodies in that liquid part is actually the significant part that we have to look for in order to make sure that these antibodies are present. And this is why right now we can add what do we call artificially colored killed salmonella. This killed salmonella is compatible to the expected antibodies, and because they are artificially colored, this will enable me to see this reaction not only in its abstract form, but it is concretized because we can see that color, and this will give us a confirmed positive result that you are typhoid positive or negative. If this agglutination takes place, this is to say that these antibodies, which are anti-salmonella antibodies, are present. However, if they were not present, this reaction will not take place, and this is how we can confirm whether you are typhoid positive or typhoid negative. معناتها, in the coming future, after 14 days of our pandemic globally, what do we expect our body to produce against COVID-19 virus? Who can tell me the answer?
Antibodies against the COVID-19.
Definitely, the antibodies against COVID-19. And that's why population in China right now and scientists in China are trying to see exactly what were the type of antibodies produced by those people who were symptomatic or asymptomatic, and they are trying to isolate these antibodies, which is a very difficult and complicated process, in order to prepare a special kit that enables us to produce a vaccine towards COVID-19. Okay, the kit nowadays اللي عم يستعملوه بالPCR in order to test for COVID-19 هو very simple, because we rely on taking samples from the nose or the mouth using cotton swab. But in the coming future, I guess it won't take more than 3 to 4 weeks. The vaccination should be available. وبعتقد a combination between Germany and China are working on testing right now this sample on human being, because they already did it on animals. هذا another sample where you can see right now the kit that we used to test for salmonella. So this sample here is actually the sample taken from a human being who is suspected to have antibodies against salmonella, and therefore the plate that you can see to the left slide should represent something that is likely to react with these antibodies, and therefore this is exactly similar to the pregnancy test. And therefore, if I have here antibodies, what shall I have here, ya Jean-Marie? If I have here antibodies, what shall I have here, ya Jean-Marie?
Antigens.
The antigens. Jean-Marie ما جاوب. مظبوط؟ شو Jean-Marie? I was expecting your answer.
عم تقطش في الانترنت ضعيفة.
Okay, never mind. بس مين قال لي antigens please? Who said antigens?
Mahmoud.
Mahmoud, never mind. Thank you, Mahmoud. And therefore, these antigens present in the Salmonella kit should react with these antibodies, and this is how we can proceed with agglutination. And this is actually another representation for the Salmonella kit, or it could be to the pregnancy test. Most ladies, by the time they have skipped their period, or actually they are unable to proceed with menstruation, they start thinking that they could be positive or negative for what do we call the HIV positive. And eventually speaking, we can talk about the immunodeficiency test that enables us to have a positive test between HIV positive, between SCG, those hormones present in the blood of a pregnant woman, and as well as the antibodies, Yajad, that are present in the kit. So what we add to the kit is actually the hormone of that female is suspecting herself to be pregnant. What do we have in the kit? Ready-made antibodies produced from a cow or a sheep or any other mammal that is likely to produce these antibodies. And therefore, any reaction between this antigen on the left and the antibodies on the right could be a positive result, and this will tell me that I am pregnant or I have HIV or whatever is it. And therefore, this is what we call by immunodiffusion, when diffusion takes place on a gel between the antigens from one side and the antibodies from the other side. بنروح على ELISA test. This is called the ELISA test, حكيت عنه امبارح. And ELISA represents a special test where there is an integration between multiple antibodies as well as the presence of an enzyme and the substrate. When they conjugate with each other, they form a specific color. So what do we have here on one hand? We have ready-made antigens that are similar and compatible to those of HIV virus, which are present in a well, a special slide that is prepared in a lab. And what do we collect from? What do we collect from the maid coming to Beirut in order to be tested whether she is HIV positive or HIV negative before we make sure that she can work at home, is to collect a sample from her blood and isolate maybe those antibodies that could be present. Once these antibodies are present, and if they are present, they will bind to these viruses that we have already made in the lab. Next, we make sure to wash in order to remove all those antibodies who didn't fix on such antigens, and therefore only those which have been able to stick on these antigens will have the opportunity next to bind to what do we call antibodies coupled to enzymes. If you pay attention for this structure and this structure, both of them are antibodies. The lower one has been able to bind with its variable part to the HIV virus. The constant region here is binding to the variable part of the other one in black. And eventually speaking, once this binding is appropriate, we add next a special substrate, enzyme substrate complex. And from a chemistry point of view, when I talk about a substrate and enzyme, يعني a chemical, a substance upon which an enzyme can act. When this reaction takes place in vitro, a special colored solution will appear. And this change, Yajad Sahannoum, will enable us to understand that we have what do we call a reaction that is positive, and this confirms that this lady, this maid, he or she is HIV positive or HIV negative. And therefore, this is to prove that antibodies in life are very, very, very important. معناتها Samar, Awlin Fathallah, myself, or anyone who is attending this session, if you search in your blood, you can find all possible antibodies that you have been exposed throughout your life. So من عمر 2 years 3 years by vaccination or because of exposure frequently to antigens معناتها التخبية بالبيت منا منيحة. The more you expose yourself to factors and changes in this environment معناتها you are exposing yourself to intruders and therefore you are giving the chance to your own body to recognize these foreign substances. So برأيكم مين أفضل؟ Somebody who is away from people or somebody who has in contact with the environment, playing in the ground أو spending much more time outside home. مين أحسن برأيكم؟ مش بهالأيام أكيد بس normally.
Somebody in contact with the environment.
أكيد being exposed more to the environment. So مين عنده more immunity? A child in KG3 ولا somebody in grade 12?
somebody in grade 12.
أكيد لأنه somebody in grade 12 صار عمره around 18 years. 18 years living in this world معناتها 18 years of experience with this environment which is abundant of viruses and germs. So التخبية normally مش بهالزمن هلا لأنه COVID-19 is something very weird, okay? But usually when we expose our children to the environment هيدا شيء positive مش negative. معناتها it's better under normal conditions that you give the opportunity for your future generation وخاصة عرابي لأنه أكيد ناوي يجيب فريق فوتبول بعد كل هالgenerations. So in this sense you can provide your future generation with more antibodies and this is how you can defend yourself and your future kids. شو عرابي حبيتها هاي؟ ما بجاوب شكله نايم. شو عربي؟ شو عربي؟ Somebody is absent. I have 19 out of 20. Who is missing? سامية ولا عربي؟
لا عرابي موجود بالآخر.
Oh, good. وسامية وين سامية؟ ما عم بسمع صوتك يا سامية. Good morning. Would you like to say good morning?
هون أستاذ هون. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to meet you. الحمد لله على السلامة. صح النوم.
الله يسلمك. ميرسي.
حبيبتي. Okay. So to proceed with the test of ELISA, definitely we have to understand much better the concept of immunity, and the best way to start discussing immunity is to understand that before we talk about AIDS and what do we call acquired immune deficiency syndrome, it's better to understand that we should have in mind two types of immunity. One is called innate and one is called acquired. When I say innate immunity, I mean by that immunity which is congenital. يعني my mom has been able to give me this immunity through the placenta barrier because of the exchange of blood vessels أكيد during pregnancy. And therefore, thanks to mom also, we have to say always thanks for your mom, that maternal antibodies have been able to cross the barrier and therefore they will be able to persist in your blood for some period of time that usually doesn't last more than few weeks, maximum to 4 to 5 months. And for those who were not attending yesterday, you can see by this moment here, which is very critical, the level of maternal antibodies is dropping down, while the level of your own antibodies, those that you have been able to produce by vaccination, or maybe those that have been able to be produced by what do we call exposure to the environment, in this sense, we become in a very critical zone because unfortunately, we don't have a very strong immunity. We have lost so much of maternal antibodies and we didn't have yet produced our antibodies. معناتها, we can expect this period from 6 months to around 1.5 years to be having kids that are more susceptible to infections. This is why at school, most of children between the age of nursery, KG1, KG2, up to grade 3, 4, usually if you check their absent list رح تشوفوا the highest record is among that category لأنه عندهم weaker immunity compared to cycle 2 وcycle 3 وcycle 4. The structure of HIV is very complicated لأنه هيدا smart. What is so smart? Sorry? Any comment? If you have any comment, please say it.
Mama.
Okay.
Mama.
Please.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday هلا قلنا لماما. عربي بعدين. Okay, so I proceed. The structure of HIV is very complicated because that virus is very smart. Why it is very smart? لأنه it has on one hand RNA and lacks what do we call DNA. Yesterday we have focused on something very critical that you have to keep in mind, which is actually called reverse transcriptase. That enzyme, which is called RT, reverse transcriptase, بذكرنا بأي reaction that we have studied in 11S or 12. مين بذكرني بأي part من البروتين synthesis عم نحكي؟ If you look at this enzyme. Transcription. And by transcription, what do we convert into which structure? What's the significance of transcription?
DNA to RNA.
DNA to RNA, excellent. بينما هون إذا سمعتوا كتير منيح reverse transcriptase will do the reverse. It will convert RNA into مين؟
DNA.
DNA. And unfortunately هيدا الفيروس اللي عبارة عن بروتين كوت، هذا كله بروتين كوت وعليه كله external epitopes GP1 GP41 GP120 عنده bilayer of lipids و some types of P24 core antigens. هول كلهم اللي شايفينهم P9 الجاج P7 جاج كلهم هول critical epitopes. If they have been able to be detected معناتها we are able to produce what do we call the the HIV structure. And therefore the moment that HIV RNA is converted into HIV DNA, look what happens right now. This is going to be the site or the target of HIV virus because that particular virus will enable to introduce its viral RNA into the host cell اللي هي هون مين رح تكون اسمها؟ Who can guess the name of this cell? This is which cell? Who can guess the name? ما سمعت؟ What's the name of this cell having CD4?
Oh, CD4. T cells.
T cells. بس which category? T4 ولا T8?
T4.
T4. And therefore T4 are actually the target of these infected, this HIV infecting structure. And eventually speaking, the RT reverse transcriptase will enable to produce viral DNA. Unfortunately, the T4 cell doesn't differentiate between viral DNA and its own DNA. So صاروا كله package واحد, and therefore whenever this DNA undergoes a transcription, okay, it will produce at the same time both human proteins and viral proteins, and therefore imagine your cell becomes a host and a factory to produce more and more viruses. And this is right now, you can see here in this diagram, to summarize with HIV, that from the moment of infection to interfering of viral DNA, RNA, to reverse transcriptase, to the production of viral DNA, this is what we call a provirus. Provirus يعني مشروع virus. وهذا unfortunately what's happening nowadays in those patients who have COVID-19. By the time we are acquiring the virus, and because our cells are unable to destroy it in terms of T4 or maybe BL, your infected cells وتحديدا in our lungs are producing more COVID-19 viral DNA وبالتالي the lung cells are producing more protein لCovid-19 وعم يصفوا the lung cells a factory for more COVID-19 viruses. This is how the number of COVID-19 viruses is expelling inside your lungs. Meanwhile, you are asymptomatic, منك عارف حالك, and you keep in contact with other neighbors, and you are transmitting this virus to others. This is why this quarantine and the 14 days of isolated at home helps us to understand that we have much better immunity and we are able to actually save much more lives, because this is how we can truly care about other relatives or even any other human being. To end up with the HIV and AIDS, this graph حكيت عنه امبارح represents significantly in terms of years how the evolution of T4 in blue drops down. So from the moment you are infected with the HIV virus, هون ايش infection, unfortunately we are still in a clinical latency period. You don't know. Your life is very normal. بتروح وبتجي, you eat very well, you sleep very well, you have normal lifestyle. Everything in terms of physiology is functioning properly. بس انت منك عارف انه the target here is actually having what do we call a drop in the number of T4 cells. Meanwhile, the HIV is growing inside your body. Unfortunately, it takes sometimes between 5 to 6 years and even to 7 years where we can notice a dramatic increase in the number of T4. And for those who studied very well the humoral with specific immune response in terms of humoral and cell-mediated, can understand that whenever I don't have T4 anymore, which reactions will be blocked? Which responses will be blocked? مين بيجاوبني؟ Any answer?
specific استاذ السل هذا mediated
as well as مين؟ as well as both humoral and cell mediated, because T4 عندها الability to communicate with the macrophages اللي اسمها الAPC, and then T4 بتقرر to either communicate with BL or to communicate with what do we call TC, and therefore the moment you have lost what do we call the tremendous number of T4, you will be right now in a situation where you have no more T4, you cannot communicate with B lymphocytes to produce antibodies, you cannot communicate with TC to become active and to kill infected cells. معناتها حضرتك صفيت somebody whose age is like me 51 or somebody whose age is 60 or 70 years كأنه is born today. What do I mean by born today? يعني كأنه كمبيوتر عم تعمل له formatting, وبالتالي you are right now a huge organism with zero immunity. يعني as if you are born to life from the beginning. This is why لكن هون شو حاطين, you have right now what we call opportunistic diseases. يعني imagine a small cough or sneezing in the face of that individual is enough to render him into a hospital لأنه ما عنده مناعة. بينما a baby who is safe, who is 2 or 3 months old, عنده more immunity than that patient who has lost his immunity. And that's why we have to keep in mind from this section that COVID-19 virus or any other virus هو عبارة عن a protein coat and a viral RNA, and being smart because it has what do we call the reverse transcriptase that enables it to produce more viruses in this period of time, which is between 7 to 14 days. أما ال HIV تحديدا لانه هو مش بس smart, very parasitic, لانه it destroys a particular T4 cells with T4 بالنسبة ل any individual like your legs. Imagine somebody cracking your femur or your legs. You will crack down, you will fall down to earth. مش هيك يا لي فتح الله مثل ما عمل فيك علي دقيق؟ مظبوط؟
لا مش
شو؟ إذا
مش مظبوط مش مظبوط.
ماشي. AD 2018 الكل العالم تعرفه. هلا اجى كوفيد 19. يلا ارتاحي شوي مني. وصل مسج يعني؟ خير. Okay, any question? Ladies and gentlemen, to proceed with the last section of today's session, it's very important to understand from the coming a few slides that we didn't have enough time yesterday to cover is actually what do we call the autoimmune disease. مين بيقول لي in 2 words or a few words what do I mean by autoimmune disease?
الجهاز المناعة بصير يحارب حاله.
Excellent. This is the voice of
يحارب myself.
برافو. مين عم يحكي؟
ماريا.
Maria. Wow, nice to meet you, Maria. Okay, so excellent. The mechanism of your own body becomes attacking yourself because تخيلي انت your own antibodies which are programmed to fight intruders. Right now your own antibodies are recognizing your cells as if they are actually what do we call intruders. So عندنا hundreds of examples concerning 12LS. عندنا from grade 10 الكل بيعرف انه every neuron is covered with what do we call myelin sheath. وهيدا المyelin sheath نوع من الفات that remains and enables the constant propagation of a nerve message across a distance. يعني المسج from the top of my head to the tip of my toes بده يمكن a speed between 80 to 120 meter per second. هيدا because of the presence of myelin. بينما unfortunately sometimes we get an infection. بتكون genetically انت born with receptors for such kind of virus. So when you have the virus, unfortunately you will be able to lose this myelin, and when you lose the myelin صار في عندي interruption in myelin, and therefore the speed of propagation decreases with the time, and this is why we are unable to proceed in normal life. Eventually speaking, vision will be blurred, the message from your brain to your eyes will be somehow blocked, the message from the brain towards your tongue, towards your senses, your motor skills, and your excretory system as well as digestive system will be decreasing dramatically. مشان هيك this individual suffers badly from hundreds of issues so simply لأنه he has lost what do we call myelin sheath. وهيدا disease اسمه multiple sclerosis because it results in the decaying of myelin sheath, and this is not at one single level, at multiple level, and that's why it is called multiple sclerosis. عندنا هون another kind of diabetes. أكيد لما نحكي عن diabetes بتفكروا somebody doesn't having insulin. مظبوط. بس imagine in this situation somebody who doesn't have insulin, not because he doesn't have insulin, because your own immunity قررت by itself to destroy what do we call the beta cells. The beta cells والفا cells اللي اخذناهم بال11S alpha produce glucagon يلي بيعلي الجلايسيميا، بينما beta cells produce insulin which decreases glycemia. So in this situation my beta cells have been so simply destroyed and I cannot produce any more insulin لأنه a viral infection hits my pancreas in particular قعدت وين على البتا cells, and therefore I am no more able to produce what do we call insulin. هيدا اللي اسمه IDDM, what do we call insulin dependent diabetes mellitus type 1, but that is due to what do we call autoimmune disease. I would like to say thank you very much for everyone who has been attending the session. my colleagues, Ms. Khulud, Mrs. Wafa, and everyone from 12 plus. Okay. Once again, please, if you have any question, please raise it right now. If you have any questions, please raise it right now, because we still have around 1 minute before we end the session. Any question? Once again, happy Mother's Day for everyone, for every colleague, and for your mothers, the great